Hello and welcome to the Duskmourn Limited Set Review Multicolored Edition. In this video I will be talking about how good I think the multicolored cards in Duskmourn are going to be in Limited, primarily draft, but Seal also somewhat applicable as well. If you have not been to one of my set reviews before, these are the tiers that I use to grade cards by. They're a little bit different than maybe some tiers other people use, but it's a fairly simple concept. Essentially, tier 1 is good, tier 5 is bad. Leaves me more room to sort of discuss cards and how good I think they are. Doesn't make me feel super pigeonholed into rating cards in a certain way. So, without further ado, we're just going to start grading cards. And we're going to be with Arabella, Abandoned Doll. So this is red-white for a 1/3. When it attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. So it's interesting, right? So we just had essentially this card in Bloomborough, right? We had the Lizard, that was the 2-mana 1/3 in black, that essentially did this, except it couldn't scale, it only did it once. And that card was pretty bad. I would rate it tier 4. Now I've upgraded this one because it can scale with the game. And if this starts dealing 2 damage per attack, it's all of a sudden it becomes a little bit better. The problem is that this deck is incentivizing you to play a lot of small creatures. And generally, red-white doesn't work super well as a deck when it has to do that. Just sort of mechanically in like Magic history, it doesn't tend to work super well, so I'm kind of starting low on this. I'm starting low on the other red-white signpost as well, just because I'm concerned that this is just going to be kind of too... Like, I don't think there's enough going wide payoffs, really, to work with these, like, finicky creatures. Because at the end of the day, the creature has to be able to attack, right? Like, this has to have good attacks for the thing to actually trigger. Like, if your opponent plays a 3/3, like, you're just kind of done. Like, you just kind of can't do the thing. Obviously, there's combat tricks to help push it through and all that. But yeah, I don't love this. Now, it is an artifact creature, so that enables Delirium, but red-white doesn't really care very much about Delirium. So, like, red does a little bit, but white doesn't care at all. So, interestingly, I actually could see there sort of being, like, a red-white Delirium deck. That's not the power 2 or less thing, because there's a lot of power 2 or less stuff. All of it seems kind of bad to me, but that remains to be seen. The Delirium element is interesting with this, kind of, but I'm not starting super high on it. I'm starting even lower on Baseball Bat. Green-white for an equipment. When it enters, attached to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, and whenever a equipped creature attacks, tap up to one target creature. So obviously this is enabling the Survivor mechanic, which is a green-white mechanic where your stuff has to be tapped at the beginning of your second main phase. So, in theory, this allows you to tap one of your opponent's blockers to get it out of the way, or it allows you to tap down your own thing to get value out of it. I mean, this just looks like stereotypical unplayable equipment to me. First of all, the rate is very bad. Like, so when it like the first rate is actually not terrible, right? You pay 2 mana, you get to have your thing on a creature, and then you get to attack, and it's like, oh, I'm getting in, and I get like my opponent's thing can't block or whatever, and that's great. The problem is most players have removal in their deck, and so because they have removal in their deck, the creature that this is attached to is going to get removed a lot of the time. Then you're gonna have to pay 3 additional mana to like re-equip it, and it's just so hard to do. It's one of those cards that even in like you could probably play this in green-white and it wouldn't be a disaster, but even if you're in green-white, it's probably not going to be the best card to pick for you. So I just don't really see this being a big player. I think the tap down deck, it's going to need to prove it to me. I'm not a believer in it right now. I think that it could be okay, it could get there, but right now I'm just not a believer, and this is part of the reason why. Beastie Beatdown. Green-red for a sorcery. Choose target creature you control and target creature an opponent controls. Delirium. If there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, put 2 +1/+1 counters on the creature you control. The creature you control deals damage equal to its power to the creature an opponent controls. So, Bite Down. Bite Down, even in 2024, is like a tier 3 card It's not. It's probably more like a tier 4 card because it's not an instant, but like it's not unplayable by any means. It's a removal. It's okay. And this Delirium mode is really strong. So like getting 2+1/+1 counters is just that's a lot of like size to be giving to your creature as a result of having Delirium here. So this is really incentivizing you to get the Delirium thing happening. And the nice thing is that I know that this is like, oh, it's a 2-mana spell. How are you really going to have Delirium going when you're casting your 2-mana spells? Well, it's a removal spell. You really are going to be casting this on turn 4 a lot. And is Delirium really achievable on turn 4? Probably not. But if you really got to kill your opponent's thing, you really got to kill your opponent's thing, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's good to have the ability to when you can. I think this is really strong just because if you ever have Delirium on, it's just like it's such a huge tempo like advantage that you're gaining that it's going to be difficult for your opponent to keep up. Brood Spinner. Black-green for a 2/3. It has reach. When it enters, you surveil 2. And you can pay 4 black-green and sacrifice it. And you have to tap it. Create a number of 1/1 black and green instant creature tokens with flying equal to the number of card types among cards in your graveyard. So, I mean, this is just a house, right? So, 2 mana, 2/3 reach. Already really strong. This card, kind of reminds, I think there's one in, like, Crimson Vow. There was this blue-green one that did something similar to this. That ended up being pretty good. I mean, this card, it's 2/3 with reach, and it surveils 2 in ETB. So that's just a lot. Already, we're at tier 2. And then I think what pushes it over the edge and makes it tier 1 to me is the fact that it has a buyout clause that essentially gives you a way of clocking your opponent in the late game. So, I mean, and like you could like recur this and then get another wave of sacrificing, and like there's just a lot of value to be had with this card, and I think it's very strong as a result. Disturbing Mirth. Black-red for an enchantment. When it enters, you may sacrifice another enchantment or creature. If you do, you draw 2 cards. When you sacrifice Disturbing Mirth, manifest Dread. So, red-black sacrifice, although there's also enchantment sacrifice this time around. It's back. It's been a long time. It's actually been longer than, it's the longest we've gone without red-black sack being a supported limited archetype in who knows how long. Like it's just they ran out of ideas, so we're back home, which is good. I like when red black sack is in limited because it tends to be a very good deck. As a result of this rating, sort of believe in it. I've seen enough support that I feel like it's going to get there in this format, at least to be playable. Maybe not be the best deck, but I think it'll be a playable deck. And this card I think is pretty good. So, what are the downsides of this card? Let's talk about the downsides first. It's obviously not an instant, so you can't blow people out with it, which is a pretty big downside. But the upside is, if you sacrifice it, you get it to manifest Dread. This card to me looks a lot like Experimental Synthesizer from Neon Dynasty, where you don't really want to play it early, but in the mid to late game, it just is such a great value engine that it's going to be tough to beat. And it gets better on multiples, which is great. It's good when your Signpost Uncommon gets better in multiples at times, because then you can just keep taking them, and it's like, oh yeah, keep rolling. Technically, you can just play this on 2 and then like manifest Dread later. It's not great, but I mean, I just think you're getting a lot for what you're paying here with this effect. So I like it quite a bit. Drag to the Roots. 2 green-black for an instant with Delirium. It costs 2 less to cast as long as there are 4 more card types on cards in your graveyard. Destroy target non-land permanent. Yep, really solid removal. So it hits any non-land permanent, and it's going to be 2 mana a lot. Even at 4 mana, destroying any non-land permanent's not the worst. So this is just going to be a really solid removal spell. Green-black with 2 banger Signpost Uncommons here. Just bangers. So yeah. Very excited to see how that plays out. Fear of Infinity. 1 blue-black for a 2/2 with flying and lifelink. It can't block, and it has Eerie. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, or whenever you fully unlock a room, you may return it from your graveyard to your hand. So, obviously 3 mana 2/2 flying lifelink is good. The problem is, it doesn't block, and even if it could block, it really wouldn't block very well. And sometimes you just have to block. Like guys, sometimes you just gotta block in limited. And there is exile removal in this set. Not a ton, but there is some. I just think this is. I understand that you're like, oh, I'm getting lifelink. I'm getting, I'm cracking back, so like it's actually fine. And there's like cute stuff you can do with putting it in your graveyard and returning it to your hand, and like discarding it and whatever. So like there's cute stuff to do with Fear of Infinity. It just, for me, is another prove it type card where it's like I have to see one of these be good before I start believing in it. It's really hard for your 3-drop to not be able to block because you're giving up. It Part of it is it means that your keeping range in your openers is worse. Like you can't keep a hand with this as your only 3-drop because on the draw anyways, because then like you're just too far behind. You're just gonna get hit for 5 that turn, and then you're gonna lose. So you and it just never blocks. And it's like, oh well, what if your opponent ever plays a creature with flying? It's like, God forbid that happens, you know. So it's not my favorite card in the set. Maybe it'll surprise me. Maybe it's one of those cards that could surprise me, but I just don't believe it. Gremlin Tamer. White blue for a 2/2. It has Eerie whenever an enchantment you control enters and whenever you unlock a room. Create a 1/1 red Gremlin creature token. Yep, so this is good. It's a solid payoff for enchantment stuff. By itself, it's a vanilla 2/2, so I've put it in tier 3 instead of tier 2 because I think that while I do think this will be good and something that's worth doing, I guess you could say, oh, but like it's a must-remove creature. Like your opponent has to remove it, and that is a reasonable argument. I think the argument between tier 3 and tier 2 is fluid with this card because like does it pull you into blue-white? It just doesn't quite seem like it pulls me into blue-white because it is not an enchantment, which. It's like this is the payoff for having enchantments in your deck, but it's not an enchantment. So it's like, is this the best payoff for having enchantments in your deck? And it's like it's probably up there, but like it has to trigger once for you to be okay with it, and it has to trigger twice for you to be like, man, I really got there. At least if I feel that way. Obviously, like the rate of it triggering once looks great. No, I should just move it up to tier 2. There's too many enchantments in the set for this not to be tier 2. Okay, so I've moved it up to tier 2. Yeah, this is where I originally had it. I moved it back. I pinballed back. There was a time I moved it down because there wasn't as many enchantments. I went back and looked. No, there's just a lot of enchantments, and you're going to want to play a lot of enchantments, and the rooms are good, specifically in blue, and so you're going to get there with this, I think, a lot. Growing Dread. Green-blue for a flash enchantment. When it enters, you manifest Dread. When you turn a permanent face up, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This card is a beating. So, let me count the ways, right? First of all, it's an enchantment, so it triggers all your enchantment stuff, which there's a lot of in this set, as you've sort of seen. Like, it just being an enchantment is kind of like a thing that is good by itself. It's so 2-mana 2/2 flash, kind of like sneaky good. Like it's one of those it's like a sneaky good stat line where it's like people like it could be easily underrated, right? But specifically in blue, it actually plays really well because you can hold up counters and stuff with 2 mana. There's not now the quench in this set I don't like very much, but this card would in theory play well with cheap counter spells or cheap interaction or whatever. And honestly, the whenever you turn a permanent face up mode, giving a +1/+1 counter on stuff, that's actually like real. That's gonna happen a lot. I know it may seem like that's not that impactful. It's whatever. But your opponent's never gonna remove this enchantment. Like they're just never gonna do it because it's not worth them doing. And so you're just getting free. Like the thing with Manifest Dread is if your deck is creature heavy enough, which I understand this is not a creature, so having it makes the Manifest Dread a little bit worse, fine. You're much more likely to hit a creature in your top 2 cards than you are in your top 1 card. So you're actually going to be able to flip the thing. My guess is that in well-built decks, you're going to be having a creature under your Manifest Dread like 65-70% of the time. I could just do the math, but I don't really have the desire. It's just going to be somewhere in that range. It's going to be more often than I think people originally realize. It's going to be less than 100%. So some people are going to overestimate it, some people are going to underestimate it. I think it's going to be somewhere in that 65% range of how often you're going to have a creature under here. But Manifest Dread is everywhere. All of the good cards in blue and green Manifest Dread, like all of them, like literally every single one, and they're just all busted. So I think that this card's going to be really good, and it's going to be one of the best signposts. The real question is, do I pick it as my best, or do I pick the 2/3 reach as my best? Tough decision. Tough decision. We'll have to see how we feel in the future for that one. Inquisitive Glimmer. White, blue for a 2/3. Enchantment spells cost 1 less to cast that you cast. Unlock costs you pay costs 1 less. I mean, it's just greases the wheels, right? It makes all your stuff more efficient. It's a must-kill threat for your opponent. It's an enchantment, so it triggers all your enchantment stuff. I do think it's better than the other blue-white signpost. I think it's kind of close. They play really well together. Cool. Lots of great stuff to see about this. Yeah, I mean, this just seems like a really strong signpost, and I'm excited to see it get to work, reducing my costs. Intruding Soul Rager. Blue-red for a 2/2 vigilance, and you can tap to sacrifice a room. Intruding Soul Rager deals 2 damage to each opponent, and you draw a card. So this is really a lot of value, right? So you think about it, you play your room, it gets the ETB value because all of them are ETBs. Then you have this on the battlefield, you get to attack if you have attacks, which you probably won't with this, but sometimes you do. And then you get to sacrifice the room to paying your opponent for 2, which is a lot actually, and then you get to also draw a card. And it's not even like only as a sorcery. You can just like hold this up and then like wait till like you can like threaten to activate a room like on your next. You could be like, oh, I might activate this room in my next turn, so like, you gotta like maybe deal with it or whatever. Like you gotta deal with the Soul Rager, and then you get to like there's surprisingly is not activate only as a sorcery, which allows you to block with this. Like you can block sack to like there's all kinds of interesting like little modes you can do. And all of them are good. Like this is just a good 2-drop too. I'm really excited about the blue-red rooms deck. So I think this is going to be good in that deck. The Jolly Balloon Man. 1 red white for a 1/4 with haste, and it has 1 to tap to create a copy of another target creature you control, except it's a 1/1 red balloon creature with addition to its other types. It has flying and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So it makes 1/1 balloons of stuff with ETBs, and then it's good. So this is good. This is fine. You're basically getting the backside of Fable the Mirror Breaker, which is good, but in Fable the Mirror Breaker is probably the best limited card printed in the one of the best limited cards printed in the last 3 years. That card was busted, and it's just been busted at every level of Magic. So getting the backside of that is pretty good. And this has haste, so you can do it immediately. And I wonder if there's some weird constructed combo with this that does something busted. Who knows? Not me. But yeah, I mean, giving the thing flying too is nice, and you're just gonna get ETBs off of this, and I think it's gonna be fine. But I don't think it's gonna be amazing. So I have it in tier 2. This may even be too generous. This might actually be a tier 3 card. I am sort of giving a little bit of credit to, you're building your deck around it a bit, you have ETBs, whatever. So maybe I should move it a little bit lower than this. But I still think you're still gonna be able to do some cool stuff with this that in the right decks. Kaito, Bane of Nightmares. 2 blue, black for a Planeswalker with 4 loyalty. It has a ninjutsu for 1 blue, black. During your turn, it is as long as it has 1 more loyalty counter on it, it's a 3/4 ninja creature with hexproof. And then it has a +1 that gives you an emblem with ninjas you control, get +1/+1. It has a 0 to surveil 2, and then you draw a card for each opponent who lost life this turn. And it has a -2 to tap target creature and put 2 stun counters on it. So I don't really get how this card works from a rules standpoint, so I'm not going to pretend that I understand it. What I do know is it's a Planeswalker. The 0 is really good. It doesn't protect itself, but that's fine. It has ninjutsu. It provides value. Maybe this is even tier 1 and I'm being too harsh. It doesn't really remove something and puts 2 stun counters on it, but that's still a lot of time. The +1's pretty bad, but you can just 0 for the whole game. You're going to be happy about it. Yeah, seems good to me. I don't fully understand the rules implications of this card, and I won't until I get to play with it on Arena, because it just is a little confusing. So I'm rating it as if it's going to be good. It looks like a good mid-range threat. I don't see any reason why this isn't going to be a good card. I just, the weirdness of it is preventing me from giving it a tier 1 rating, which maybe it just is, and I'm, being overcritical because the plus doesn't do anything. But, yeah. Marina Vendrell. And it is Wooburg for a 3/5. When it enters, reveal the top 7 cards of your library. Put all enchantment cards from among them on the bottom of your library. All enchantment cards from among them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And you can tap to lock or unlock a door of target room you control. Activate only as a sorcery. So obviously this is too tough to cast for it to be good and limited. You can try to build around this. I don't think it's the worst. I don't think it's the worst build around of all time in this format. I actually think it is something you can do. I do have it rated in tier 5, more as a precaution than as an actual power level rating. If you could cast the card reliably, I would say that it's probably a tier 3 card. I mean, if you could cast it on 5 every game, it would probably be tier 2, but you can't. And it's kind of it's more of a warning. The rating is kind of a warning of don't try to do this unless you really got it, because you do need to hit 2 enchantments for this to actually be good. Even if it hits just 1, you're not super excited. It's okay if it just hits 1, but you really need to hit, the rate is pretty bad if you just hit 1. So to hit 2 in your top 7, you're going to need to be playing 7. I would want at least 7 enchantments to put this in my deck. And that's going to be definitely feasible. And the fact that you can, on your next turn, lock or unlock a room. I should move this up to tier 4 because it is kind of aspirational. The problem is casting it. The fixing in this set is okay. There's the common dual lands, and there are some 5-color fixing, but there's not a ton of true 5-color fixing where there's stuff that taps for 1 mana of any color. So that's kind of not great. So I don't know. I think this is probably not going to perform very well. I could be wrong about it. I think it is worth doing if you can actually cast it. Midnight. Oh, I forgot to move this down. Let's do that in a second. Midnight Mayhem. 2 red, white for a sorcery. Create 3 1/1 red gremlin creature tokens. Gremlins you control gain menace, lifelink, and haste until end of turn. So obviously these are really small creatures, but they have menace, lifelink, and haste. I should move this down though, because I think that I've underestimated these type of effects before, but I think this one's not amazing. So I'm contemplating moving it down again, for the record. I've moved it down and thought about it some more, and I'm should I move it down to tier 4? Oh, man. Because 4 mana for 3 1/1s. It's pretty bad. Now, they have haste and lifelink and menace, so it's not as if they're not going to do something. I just am worried that you're they seem like they're going to be so blocked. The menace, maybe. They also, after this turn, they don't do anything. They just are 3. After the turn they get into play, they don't have the abilities anymore. So they just sit there. Your opponent can just be yeah, take it. And then you're oh, I gained 3 life, and now I have 3 1/1s that are tapped. And I'm just now obviously again, the whole thing with red-white is, oh, I want my stuff to be Metal True. So it works well with the other signpost. But the problem is, do I think that other signpost is great? No. And your opponent can just be okay, I'll just block the signpost, and the gremlins can do whatever they want. I'm moving it down another tier. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it so much. Very rare. Very rare for me to move something down 2 tiers in the set review. Bad editing by me. Bad reviewing. But yeah, it's just the stats. I don't. And this is, again, I got by Scurry of Gremlins, right? The Scurry of Gremlins, I was it only makes 2 1/1s for 4 mana. But that one made a bunch of energy, and also you could pump your other creatures. This doesn't do any of that, and I'm going to put it back down here because if the Gremlins just had these abilities, I'd be much more interested because they just present a lingering threat. But you attack your opponent for 3, they're okay, take 3, and then you gain 3. It's okay, great. But the next turn you're sitting there with 3 1/1s, and you're just man, I wish these 3 1/1s were doing anything. And so, in some game states, it's going to be great. I just don't think it's going to be enough of the time. Nasi, Searcher in the Dark. Blue-black for a 2/2 with menace. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you mill that number many cards. You may put any number of legendary and/or enchantment cards from among them into your hand. If you put no cards in your hand, this way put a +1/+1 counter on Nashi. So 2-mana 2/2 menace that grows with the game or draws you some cards. Both really good. Does just die to removal, so there's that. However, just a nice 2-drop. Really good 2-drop. Nothing more to say. Just seems really strong. Good solid card. Nico, Light of Hope. 2 white blue for a 3/4. When it enters, you create 2 shard tokens. You can pay 2 and tap to exile target non-legendary creature you control. Shards you control become copies of it until the beginning of the next end step. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. That mode is mostly weird and not that good, but the shards by themselves are sick because they just draw you cards. So this is just a really big 3-bit inspector. And really big 3-bit inspectors are really good. So this card's really good. 3-bit inspector, one of the very few common tier 1 cards this year. So it earned it and never left tier 1. So this card, for similar reasons, is going to be in tier 1 forever and is going to be very strong. Oblivious Bookworm. Green blue for a 2/3. At the beginning of your end step, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card unless a permanent entered the battlefield face down under your control this turn, or return a permanent face up this turn. So 2-mana 2/3 enables Delirium, loots every turn. There's not a lot not to like here. This is really strong. I'm not going to have it as my strongest signpost. I don't even think it's the strongest blue-green signpost, which is maybe a hot take. And might be wrong. Both of the blue-green signposts are extremely strong and 2 mana, which makes me think that the deck is going to be nuts. But maybe not. Maybe not. It looks to me like, I mean, this card looks ridiculous too. Like, both of them look so good. Because, like, the thing is, it's going to be, like, anytime you manifest, you just get to draw a card when you have this in play. And, like, every card, like, all the good cards in blue-green manifest. So, again, like, there's also a lot of 3-mana stuff that manifests specifically. So, like, this fits perfectly into the curve, and is just going to start drawing you cards as early as turn 3. I don't know. It seems insanely strong to me. It just seems like your opponent has to kill this or they instantly lose. Again, similar to the blue-green enchantment, like, you're just going to get value up front. You're just going to get value over the course of the game. It's going to be really annoying to deal with this. I don't know. This card seems insane to me. Peer past the veil. 2 red-green for an instant. Discard your hand, then draw X cards, where X is the number of card types among cards in your graveyard. So obviously this enables itself. You can discard your hand, draw. Don't do this. There's better ways to do this. Like, you don't want to be paying 4 mana and discarding your hand. You just don't want to do it. Yeah, I don't know. Sneaky, kind of a fun vintage cube card, maybe. I don't know. It's probably bad there too. But it could be good. It's not, though. It's a draw 7. It's not a draw 7. But if it was a draw 7, imagine it was a draw 7, you know? I just don't, this being an instance cool, I don't know. I just don't think it's great. Like, I think there's better ways to do this, and you're probably going to end up hurting yourself more than you're helping yourself trying to do it. Restricted Office / Lecture Hall. So Restricted Office, when you unlock this door, destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater, and Lecture Hall, all other permanents you control have hexproof. So both of these are extremely expensive things. The Lecture Hall is just terrible and is awful, so you don't want that. And Restricted Office is just too situational. Like, 4 mana to destroy all creatures power 3 or greater is not very good, and you don't really want to play it in your deck. And I don't really think you want either of these modes, and I think this card's bad. Rip Spawn Hunter. 2 green-white for a 4/4. It has survival at the beginning of your second main phase. If this creature is tapped, reveal the top X cards of your library where X is its power. Put any number of creature and/or vehicle cards with different powers from among them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So obviously this is very good if you actually trigger the survival thing, and there are ways to do it turn 1. Obviously if you have vehicles, you can Just do it immediately. There's no common vehicles, I don't believe. There's a couple of rares, but there's not a ton, there's not common vehicles. There's other commons that like would allow you to tap stuff immediately. I don't know. I'm not really a buyer in the tap archetype being functional. This card is just a 4 mana 4/4 by itself, pretty good. Even if it just comes in and dies, it's probably going to eat their best removal spell, which is good. I just don't think that's enough to put it in tier 1, but I do still think it's a very strong. I think it's a strong card. Rite of the Moth. 1 white, black, black for a sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. It has flashback for 3 white, white, black. As much as I love flashback, and as much as Unburial Rites is a card that is more fun than it is good, this card to me looks. I mean, I'm gonna have to see the Reanimator deck to believe it. It will be a deck that comes together sometimes, and I think those times when it comes together, this card will be good in that deck. I don't think you should pick it highly. I think you should be trying to wheel these. They're very restrictively costed. It's going to be very difficult to cast this on time. And you just like, it's just going to be tough. Like how much value are you really getting from reanimating something for 6 mana? You're not, like, it's really not that great. 4 mana, it's okay, but like this is like 4.5 mana. This is like closer to 5 mana. This is expensive, you know. It's not a cheap way to reanimate stuff. It's a sorcery speed. It is like, I know 4 mana is kind of like lower than they usually are willing to go with reanimation, but like you can just mill this and get free value, which is great. That's the best mode on the card, but I don't know. I have to see it to believe it, and right now I'm not a believer. Roaring Furnace Steaming Sauna. So Roaring Furnace is 1 in red. When you unlock this door, this room deals damage equal to the number of cards in your hand to target creature an opponent controls. So you've had this effect before. It's Master the Way, essentially, except without drawing a card. It tends to play better than it actually reads. These type of effects can read pretty bad, but actually they tend to play very good. And then you get the backside of this room, which is Steaming Sauna, which is 3 blue blue, and you have no maximum hand size. And at the beginning of your end step, you draw a card. Typically a card that is very bad and limited because it doesn't do any. It's not interacting with your opponent's stuff. But when it's good, it's unbelievable and just wins you the game. So it's the perfect thing to have stapled on to your removal spell. This to me just looks really strong. It looks kind of like Hunter's Talent in a way, because Hunter's Talent essentially was like this, where you would remove a thing, and it was Hunter's Talent was conditional, right? This is conditional removal. Hunter's Talent, conditional removal. This is like eventually like you have to flip the thing, and then you win. This is 2 colors, so it's harder, whatever. This is kind of like the perfect card, the colorless key thing that unlocks rooms. This is kind of the perfect card to use with that, because you could actually, like, on turn 2 you could play this, and on turn 3 you could unlock the Steaming Sauna, and that's a really powerful ability. You could just start drawing 2 cards a turn for the rest of the game, essentially becoming the Monarch, which is really, really good. It's a really powerful thing to be able to do, and it's the perfect place for it to be attached to, because it's on a removal spell, which means you can include it in your deck for free, and it's going to be really strong. Sawblade Skin Ripper. 1 black-red for a 3/2 with Menace. Sacrifice another creature or enchant. It's 2 colors a minute to do this. Sacrifice another creature or enchantment. Put a +1/+1 counter on the Skin Ripper. At the beginning of your end step, if you sacrifice 1 or more permanents this turn, Sawblade Skin Ripper deals that much damage to any target. So notably, this works with Terramorphic Expanse. So be advised. So if you sacrifice a land to, like, you know, not a thing that's going to come up very often, but it's not 0. This is not a sack that you really want to be using. Like, making this thing bigger is not, like, making this more of a threat is not great, because your opponent already wants to kill it. 3 mana 3/2 Menace is okay. It's okay. As an aggressive card, it's fine. You're never really going to want to be blocking with it anyways. Even if it was like a 2/3 Menace, you wouldn't really want to be blocking with it. So I think it's fine that's a 3/2. The fact that you can put the damage anywhere is really strong, and your opponent has to treat this like a significant threat. On turn 5, you can play this, sacrifice something, ping a 1-drop. Not the best. If you get to sacrifice 2 things in a turn, once this gets to 2 damage, it's really, really, really good. And so I think that's solid. It does need some help, and so maybe I should bump it down a tier. I mean, all the cards need some help to a certain degree. As a 3-drop, maybe should bump it. I actually am going to bump this down 1 tier, just a second. So the reason I've bumped this down a tier is specifically because there's a 2 mana black common removal spell at instant speed that kills 2 toughness things, and that scares me a lot. Like, this just coming down and dying happens a high percentage of the time. Now, it does eat a removal spell, so that's why it's in tier 3, but I do think there's other sack outlets that are better. This one's okay. It's not necessary. It's not essential for the deck to function. I think the other red-black signpost is better than this one and meaningfully, and so I think that I should take that into account in my ratings here. Shrewd Storyteller. 1 green, white for a 3/3 with survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if it's tapped, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So it can be any creature, not just this one. I don't know. I don't have any interest in this. So obviously it's like, oh my god, it's Innkeeper's Talent, but the creature has to be tapped and still on the battlefield, and it's a creature, so it's much easier to interact with, and it has to be tapped, and like it has to, like, I don't know. All it just looks, I don't know. I'm down on the whole green-white deck. If the whole green-white deck functions, then this card will be good in that deck. I don't think it's going to be a high priority in that deck, but I think it'll be fine. Right now, I don't think that deck's going to be functional, so I have it in tier 4. Shroud Stomper. 3 white, white, black for a 5/5 with death touch. When it enters or attacks, each opponent loses 2 life. You gain 2 life and draw a card. So obviously you're trying to reanimate this, right? That's the joke. You want to get this in your graveyard and then reanimate it. But even when you do that, it's not like amazing. Like if you get this on for 4 mana, obviously that's great. It's gonna be tough to make that work in a lot of game states, and like it's just so, like, I don't know. It's just such a medium reanimation payoff. You know what I mean? Like, you'll play it in your reanimation deck in limited, but I don't. This is sort of why I think reanimator doesn't work. Is I'm like, this is what you get. It's like it's fine. Like it's good if you can get it on turn 4, but you're never like the games where you draw this and it sits in your hand and doesn't do anything are just such a disaster. And that happens. Like you hope it doesn't happen very often, but I think it's gonna happen like a decent percentage of the time. And just kind of like sitting there like, oh well, this big thing that doesn't do anything is in my hand again. I don't know. I'm not super excited. It's got to prove it to me. Skull Snap Nuisance. Black, white for a 1/4 with flying. When an enchantment or you control enters the room, or whenever you fully unlock a room, surveil 1. Yeah, I mean, this just seems like a fine 2-drop that is defensive in a blue-black deck. It's giving you a little bit of value, not a ton. This is not very exciting, but it is, like, okay. It's a fine 2-drop in your blue-black deck that's going to be slower and is going to be doing some room stuff. Like, this honestly is probably better in, like, a Grixis deck, like, to be honest with you. Like, splashing blue or splashing red, I don't know. One of those two things is happening, because this just seems to me like it's going to be not the most exciting thing by itself. Smokey Lounge, Misty Salon. So Smokey Lounge at the beginning of your first main phase, add red, spend this mana only to unlock room spells, to cast room spells and unlock doors, and there's Misty Salon, which is 3 and a blue. Whenever you unlock this door, you create an XX blue spirit creature token with flying, where X is the number of unlocked doors among rooms you control, which would be 2 if you unlock both of the sides of this door. So then, like, so this by itself, so this is like a must-kill thing when you play it on 3 is the Smokey Lounge, because there's so many rooms, like there's just so many rooms. And there's a lot of rooms that just have expensive sides where you can just be like, yeah, I mean, I'm getting a bunch of discounts here, and I'm getting a lot of mana, and it's red, it's actually colored mana, which is somewhat relevant in some cases, and I don't know, this is just a lot of mana to get every turn, and you're going to take over the game very fast. And then you even are given, like, the Misty Salon as a backside that is also just like a win condition. So I think this is great. This just seems really great to me. The Swarm Weaver. 2 black-green for a 2/3. When it enters, you create 2 1/1 black and green inside creature tokens with flying. And in Delirium, as long as there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, insects and spiders you control have +1/+1 and have death touch. So this just meets all your criteria for a tier 1 card. ETBs on tier 4 on turn 4 makes 3 pieces of material. The base stats are 4/5. This looks a lot like Beza. I don't know. It's not Beza, obviously, but it you know, with Delirium it basically is Beza. It just makes 2/1/1 flyers when ETBs and it's a 2/3. Like that's great. It's just great. It's just a great thing to have, and like you know, there are more insects and spiders than just the ones this makes too in green black. So that's great. Undead Sprinter. Green, or black red for a 2/2 with trample and haste. You may cast it from your graveyard if a non-zombie creature died this turn. If you do, it enters with a +1/+1 counter on it. Notably, it can block, which sometimes like a lot of these cards they make so they can't block. There's no restrictions on this, and it does have haste, and like this just seems like pretty great to me. It really does work well in the sack deck, and that's what red black's doing. So I think it's going to be good in the deck it's supposed to be good in, and that's why I like it a lot. Victor Valgavoth's Seneschal. 1 white black for a 3/3 with Eerie. When an enchantment enters, or when you fully unlock a room. If it's the first time this happened each turn, surveil 2. If it's the second time, each opponent discards a card. If it's the third time, put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So it can be either graveyard. Triggering this 3 times in a turn is not completely unachievable, but is unlikely. I think hitting it twice in a turn is something you could set up to do pretty consistently in the game, and I think this is a good payoff for doing that. Making your opponent discard a card is great. Surveilling 2 for the first one is really good. It does do nothing by itself, so I think I should probably move this down to tier 3. Just because, yeah, I am actually going to do that real quick. So I moved it down to tier 3, and the primary reason for that is it really is just a 3-mana 3/3 by itself. It doesn't do a whole lot. It's fine. I don't think it's amazing or anything. I think it's a solid card, and if they just printed 3-mana 3/3 surveil 2, like what is that? Like how much different is this than that card? And I think it's probably about the same in terms of how good it would be. So that's how I'm rating it, and I think that's kind of what this actually is. Wildfire Wickerfolk. Green red for a 3/2 with haste. It has delirium. When it gets +1/+1 and has trample as long as there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard. Yeah, this card's just cracked. It's a great 2-drop. It does everything you want. It enables delirium, trades up, good on turn 2, gets damage in. I think this is just a great reason to be red-green, and this might be like the reason red-green is a good deck. If red-green is a good deck, I think this is going to be a large part of the reason why. Winter Misanthropic Guide. 1 black, red, green for a 3/4 with ward 2. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws 2 cards. Delirium. As long as there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, each opponent's maximum hand size is equal to 7 minus the number of those card types. So, obviously, if you have 7 types in your graveyard, your opponent's max hand size is 0, which means they can't have cards in their hand after their turn. Unfortunately, they will be you are drawing them 2 extra cards. Now you get to see the cards first, right? Because it's drawing them on your upkeep, and they can hold fewer cards, so they have to cast all their spells every turn when they can. But you're still giving your opponent free resources, and I don't love that. I'm sure you can do some sweet stuff with this. You do get to see the cards first. It's not the worst 4-drop of all time, so I'm not giving it like a stone cold tier 5 grade. I don't think it's really worth doing, but it's kind of fun because that kind of seems like it's fun. Zamone All Questioning. 1 green-blue for a 1/1. At the beginning of your end step, if a land entered the battlefield under your control this turn, and you control a prime number of lands, create Primo the Indivisible, a legendary 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, then put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So, on turn 3, if you played a land, which you probably did, this is Blade Splicer. Blade Splicer is busted. Sometimes it is better than Blade Splicer because it makes more tokens. Like when you get to 5 lands, then if you trade it off your thing, actually it doesn't matter if you trade it off your hold on. Yeah, no, it actually doesn't matter because you can just upgrade. You can upgrades people upgrades, and it'll just make more. It'll just keep making guys. It just seems really busted, and a great card. So that's it for the multicolored cards in Duskmourn. If you enjoyed, that's great. Stick around. There'll be more set review content coming for Duskmourn, and also for future sets. Like and subscribe if you liked the content and want to see more of it. See you next time.